Okay, so we finished Wuthering Heights, starting on a new book, The Scarlet Pimpernel. And since this is aristocratic propaganda, in my opinion, I want to look at this through a Marxist lens, Du Boisian lens, progressive lens, just to critique it, highlight the areas that are being manipulative, dehumanizing the masses, providing empathy for upper class people, the ruling class. But before I get into that, I wanted to read this note. This is my version of the Communist Manifesto. This is an editor's note. And it touches on the French Revolution, which is what this is based on, like this time period. So I think it's pertinent. This is a quote. "Revolution, that last resort of an indignant nation." Alexis de Tocqueville. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto, published in 1848, though chronologically almost equidistant between the French Revolution of 1789 and the Russian Revolution of 1917, is the document that links the two most earth-shaking revolutions in history. In it, Marx and Engels looked back to the French Revolution and analyzed their own Europe, about to boil over into revolution in order to look forward. Later, Trotsky and Lenin, the most important Russian revolutionaries of 1905 and 1917, sometimes saw themselves fulfilling the prophecies of what had become socialism's most holy document. For more than 150 years, the Communist Manifesto has influenced our sense of history and helped promote social justice. The philosopher Karl Popper, though critical of many aspects of Marxism, recognizes Marx's contribution not only to ideas but to deeds. One cannot do justice to Marx without recognizing his sincerity, his open-mindedness, his sense of facts, his distrust of verbiage, and especially of moralizing verbiage, made him one of the world's most influential fighters against hypocrisy and Phariseeism. He had a burning desire to help the oppressed, and was fully conscious of the need for proving himself in deeds and not only in words. His main talents being theoretical, he devoted immense labor to forging what he believed to be scientific weapons for the fight to improve the lot of the vast majority of men. His sincerity in his search for truth and his intellectual honesty distinguish him, I believe, from many of his followers. Idealism about human nature and hopefulness for social progress, less than any one ideology, characterize these 36 selections that begin with Rousseau's spirited analysis of social inequality. So it's other revolutionary writings as well. So that's what it's referring to. Necessarily, these selections are only a few of the thousands of eruptions from mountains of materials. All are famous and passionate outpourings of revolutionaries or revolutionary thinkers, even though in their time the ideas of the revolutionaries were at odds with each other, or became so, sometimes to their own or their cause's destruction. The men who rush into undertakings of vast change usually feel they are in possession of some irresistible power, observed Erich Hofer. The generation that made the French Revolution had an extravagant conception of the omnipotence of man's reason and the boundless range of his intelligence. Lenin and the Bolsheviks, who plunged recklessly into the chaos of the creation of a new world, had blind faith in the omnipotence of Marxist doctrine. The greatest analyst of the ideas and history that created the French Revolution, Alexis de Tocqueville, simultaneously complicates and clarifies our understanding of social upheaval. Quote, "It is not always when things are going from bad to worse that revolutions break out. On the contrary, it oftener happens that when a people which has put up with an oppressive ruler over a long period without protest suddenly finds the government relaxing its pressure, it takes up arms against it. Thus, the social order overthrown by a revolution is almost always better than the one immediately preceding it." The social overthrown, yes. And experience teaches us that, generally speaking, the most perilous moment for a bad government is one when it seeks to mend its ways. Only consummate statecraft can enable a king to save his throne when, after a long spell of oppressive rule, he sets to improving the lot of his subjects. Patiently endured so long as it seemed beyond redress, a grievance comes to appear intolerable once the possibility of removing it crosses men's minds. Tocqueville's short book, L'Ancien Régime et la Révolution, published in 1856, contains more solid and incontrovertible historical criticism than hundreds of volumes of later date, writes an outstanding Italian historian of the French Revolution, Gaetano Salvemini. As wonderful as L'Ancien Régime et la Révolution, wow, my French accent's really hurting right now. You can tell how often I use it. There are no end of analyses and histories of revolution and no shortage of biographies of the men and women who have stood at the forefront of revolution. Okay, so that's a little taste of Marx, just setting the scene, because it definitely played a role, the French Revolution, in this modern idea of what we have in going up against imperialist power and distributing wealth and power to the masses. Okay. Oh, I need to get on my gloves so that I don't ruin my book, especially since this is paperback. Okay. I've read The Scarlet Pimpernel once. I enjoyed it. I think I read it in 8th grade. So I was like 13, 14. And I borrowed it from a teacher to read it because they were reading it as a class. And I was like, I want to read that book. Can I read that book? And my teacher was like, okay, well, kids are actually wanting to read. This is weird. You little nerd. So that was me. But especially at the time, I was not necessarily engaging with the class consciousness of it. So that's something I want to do this time around. There are movies and musicals. The musical has such beautiful music, I have to say. I've sung one of the songs, I mean a couple of the songs, but one of the songs I would do for like competitions growing up. And I'd win. But the music is beautiful. I enjoy the musical. The Jane Seymour movie is entertaining. But we're going to take a critical look at all of these pieces. Okay, so starting The Scarlet Pimpernel, wow, by Baroness Orczy. Okay, so this is like a little introduction, a small one on her, the author, and then it will get into the larger introduction. So we won't get to chapter 1 probably today. Baroness Amuska Magdalena Rosalia Maria Josefa Barbara Orczy was born into a family of wealthy Hungarian aristocrats in 1865. Her father, Baron Felix Orczy, was a musician and composer who counted Franz Liszt and Richard Wagner among his friends. The family left Hungary after peasants vandalized the ancestral estate, moving first to Brussels, peasants, in the revolution, I'm guessing. Moving first to Brussels, then to Paris, and finally to London. Baron Orczy became enraged in the artistic and musical circles of the city. Oh, enraged? He became engaged. Whoops. My bad. And young Emma met many musical luminaries of the time. Though encouraged by her father to study music, Emma attended art school where she met her future husband, Montague Barstow. Orczy wrote The Scarlet Pimpernel in just 5 weeks. Whoa, that's quick. It helps if you have free time. It helps if you don't have to work for money. If you have a title. Failing to find a publisher for the novel, she and her husband rewrote the work as a play, first produced in 1903 and published the novel 2 years later. In both forms, The Scarlet Pimpernel was an immediate sensation, catapulting the Baroness to fame. She became a highly regarded writer of detective stories, penning popular chronicles of crime solvers such as Lady Molly of Scotland Yard, Orsi wrote more than 60 books, including many continuations of the Pimpernel saga, but she is immortalized as the author of The Scarlet Pimpernel. I didn't know there were follow-ups to this book. Interesting. The Baroness spent World War II in Monte Carlo, unable to secure safe passage through Nazi-occupied France. Okay. I thought she was much older than this. I don't think I had an understanding of when she was born. All right. So this wasn't during the French Revolution. Montague Barstow died in 1942. Alone and far from home, Baroness Orsi began her autobiography, Links in the Chain of Life, which was published shortly before her death in London on November 12th, 1947. Okay, so we get a little bit of a timeline. Oh, she's born in 1865. And we see that because of all of the unrest that is happening, like she was obviously inspired to write this because her family was on the receiving end of revolutionary action. So she's like, I have to defend the royals. Okay, you can do that. It doesn't mean that you're going to survive or that people like them, but okay. Okay, this is the introduction. The year 2005 marks the centennial of the publication of The Scarlet Pimpernel. During the past 100 years, this novel has been reissued more than 100 times and has met with success that is little short of phenomenal. The novel's eponymous hero has become a legendary character so well known that British agents sent to the Soviet Union after 1917 adopted variations of Pimpernel as a codename. Of course they did. Of course they did, especially visiting the Soviet Union doing that. It's like, we're heroes for the ruling class. Suffice it to say that the novel's fame has grown. Indeed, The Scarlet Pimpernel has developed into a multimedia enterprise, inspiring sequels by Baroness Orsi and others, numerous adaptations for film and stage, a Broadway musical, and even an internet role-playing game. The novel at the source of all these interpretations is a particularly gripping text, one that has not lost its luster over time. It will become more irrelevant over time if we actually have progress in society, because it won't be quite as idolized, in my mind. This is the name of the section. In the Shadow of Mamselle Guillotine. The volume we are presenting here is the first of a series of 10 novels published between 1905 and 1940 that present the adventures of the Scarlet Pimpernel. The first volume is certainly the most famous and widely read of them all, and it has had its own fabulous destiny. For it paves the way for the future plots, introduces the readers to the main characters, and vividly depicts and opposes the two theaters of the action, France and England, only a few hours apart by boat, but symbolizing two completely different universes. The date is September 1792, after the infamous September massacres. The revolutionaries have decided to start history anew. In a few months, a new calendar will be established, beginning with l'an 1, meaning year 1. Each month is rebaptized and given a new name, selected for its agrarian associations, and the old Christian names are thrown out. France will become an ill-famed regicide regime with the public execution of King Louis XIV. Louis XVI. Roman numerals. Louis XIV was the one who built Versailles. On January 21st, 1793. The bloodiest phases of the French Revolution, the so-called Reign of Terror, or simply the Terror, will soon begin. The Scarlet Pimpernel cycle takes place during these particularly brutal years from September 1792 to the fall of the radical revolutionary Maximilien de Robespierre in July 1794. In certain episodes, the fictional actions combine with authentic historical events. In the novel El Dorado, for example, the Scarlet Pimpernel will be instrumental in the escape of the young Dauphin, Louis XVII. whose fate has fueled speculation for more than 2 centuries. In Baroness Orsi's imagination, France is a country in chaos. A mob runs amok, mercilessly murdering its former elite, the aristocrats. The fact that the action starts in September 1792 is significant. We, as readers, do not learn much about the French Revolution of 1789, its hopes, ideologies, and ethos. Instead, we are plunged into the violent and cruel context of the terror. Yeah, so immediately is not setting the scene of like why this type of violence is happening, what the people have been suffering under. Okay? That is propaganda. Here are the first lines of the novel. A surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings that are human only in name. Dehumanization from the very beginning of these crowds. For to the eye and ear they seem naught but savage creatures, animated by vile passions and by the lust of vengeance and of hate. Yeah, or maybe justice. During the greater part of the day, the guillotine had been kept busy at its ghastly work. All that France had boasted of in the past centuries, of ancient names and blue blood, had paid toll to her desire for liberty and for fraternity. The carnage had only ceased at this late hour of the day because there were other more interesting sights for the people to witness. And so the crowd rushed away from the Place de Grève and made for the various barricades in order to watch this interesting and amusing sight. We are in the thick of the action, shoulder to shoulder with the crowd, surrounded by a repulsive throng, immersed in a gruesome spectacle. Well, there's a reason why people were very intent on using the guillotine. Because conditions were unlivable. Soon we witness an unequal, yet fascinating cat-and-mouse game between the crowd and the helpless aristocrats, pathetically attempting to go past the barricade. The helpless aristocrats, as if they don't have, like, a hand in what is happening in exploiting people. Attempting to go past the barricade and leave the city. The aristocrats are purposely and sadistically let go. Teeny! Hi! Hello! Welcome! Good to see you! Come here! Okay. The aristocrats are purposely and sadistically let go, taste freedom for a few moments of intense relief, and are apprehended minutes later. Unless, thanks to some miraculous intervention of the Scarlet Pimpernel, they vanish into thin air before the guards' very noses. Clearly, a hero is needed. Is he? Is he needed? I mean, I don't think that, like, the kids should be killed. I don't think they should be. But the way that it is trying to portray is, like, the common people, everyday people, working class people as these ruffians and just abnormally cruel. It's like, okay, but the circumstances that people were experiencing were abnormally cruel as well. And whatever these people experienced in the meantime was probably not as dire as what many people were experiencing in their everyday lives. That's my take. Clearly, a hero is needed. And these very first images give us the dramatic setup for the Scarlet Pimpernel's extraordinary deeds. In the first minutes of the 1934 film adaptation of the novel, the guillotine presides over the scene as a ghastly and imposing apparition. We watch aristocrats being dragged from their tumbrils and executed at the regular intervals of a factory production line. Each falling head is followed by hurrahs. Each provokes a few seconds of attention from the tricoteuses, those spiteful witches who raise their heads from their knitting for a few seconds to absorb the spectacle before taking up their needles again. That would be me. That would be me. On the other side of the channel, however, the picture is completely different. Not only do beauty and elegance reign, but courage, heroism, and wit ultimately prevail. The Scarlet Pimpernel introduces a mythical English hero that represents a royalist sentiment. We love kings. We love being ruled by an aristocracy. Not only do... Oh, wait. I already read that. The Scarlet Pimpernel introduces a mythical English hero, one who has indeed all the qualities of a typical Avenger. He is what critics of popular novels call a Promethean hero. Although his identity must remain secret, he stirs passions in both France and England, and his name is on everyone's lips. Well known to the British public, he inspires fashions and trends. Quote, "Heard of the Scarlet Pimpernel? Faith, man, we talk of nothing else. We have hats a la Scarlet Pimpernel. Our horses are called Scarlet Pimpernel. At the Prince of Wales' supper party the other night, we had a soufflé a la Scarlet Pimpernel. Lud. The other day I ordered at my milliner's a blue dress trimmed with green, and bless me if she did not call that a la Scarlet Pimpernel." But most important, like all great and fearless heroes, the Pimpernel leaves a trademark sign after every act of bravery. Like all great and fearless heroes? What a weird thing to say. Not all great and fearless heroes leave trademarks. Sometimes that's better so that they can actually get away with their heroism and not be caught. Okay? His passing is indicated by papers printed with a humble red flower, a Scarlet Pimpernel. A gesture that not only shows his debonair demeanor, so he's pretentious and dramatic, theatrical, but also a playful taste for risk-taking. An aristocrat himself, duh, because who else would be motivated to be saving these aristocrats? The Pimpernel leads a group of 19 well-born young men ready to sacrifice themselves for the perilous yet exhilarating task of snatching endangered French aristocrats from the bloody grip of the Revolution. The Scarlet Pimpernel presents such rescues as moral actions, and also as an exciting sport. The Pimpernel and his men behave like knights, but the reader will find neither reflection nor justification for their actions in the text. Their deeper motivation is not expressed. Explanations are unnecessary. Yeah, conveniently. Because the aristocrats' lives seem to matter more than the masses, perhaps, to these upper-class people. The Scarlet Pimpernel is an adventure novel, a genre that rests on the threshold between popular literature and the historical novel. Baroness Orczy, in fact, calls the book a historical romance. It certainly contains historical ingredients, but its main purpose is to depict action and love. As such, The Scarlet Pimpernel exemplifies the paradoxes of its genre. Critics can brush off even an unequivocal bestseller as frivolous. It is indeed a stretch to reconcile the feelings of excitement readers will surely feel given such eventful episodes with a more academic approach to the text, academics tending, as they do, to address literature soberly and dispassionately. Excuse me. I mean, not like I'm an academic. I think I am one in my heart. Not in degree. Like all popular novels, The Scarlet Pimpernel has its fans and aficionados. Yet the book has also been criticized for its political views. Hi! For its cardboard cutout figures and for a simplistic vision of revolutionary France. But as in many popular novels, the narrative is based on simplicity, which is what guarantees the transparency of its mechanisms and intentions. As critic Michael Nathan writes, popular novels have always been a problematic genre, insofar as a popular novel's dramatic simplifications generate, more than could a more complex novel, a readership that reads for pleasure and drama and consumes such works avidly. Clearly, the more serious author might be... Sorry, I was losing my place. Might both be envious of such easily earned popularity and yet be ambivalent about having such a powerful influence on the public. This is an excerpt of Michael Nathan's. The popular novel invokes heroism and denounces infamy, loudly condemns the suffering of victims or the cruelty of the executioner. Not all popular things. It stages in a very coded fashion both poverty and aristocratic living, fallen women, women for sale, adultery, the army and the church, cloak and dagger plots, patriotic exploits, noble acts, and trivial actions. Fallen women, women for sale, Jesus. Although, and it's of course like men as the heroes have to come in and save them. Although subject to a large number of constraints, it has, nevertheless, at its disposition a limited palette of lurid colors, black, white, and red, and insofar as they are the fundamental colors, it neither adulterates them nor mutes their effect. The popular novel rehearses its certitudes, distinguishing sharply between the good and the bad, the pure and the impure, values never questioned and effectively situated beyond historical contingency. These premises are fundamental if one wants to read The Scarlet Pimpernel, not simply as a revolutionary adventure novel, but as one that naturally casts aristocrats and the radical republicans, known as the sans-culottes, in the unambiguous role of victims and executioners. Yeah, which is a simplistic way to be looking at it, so I agree with the criticism. Because the action takes place during the Revolution, these figures are, of course, historically determined, but it is the dramatic imperatives of the adventure genre that dictate the novel's presentation of history and its actors. Adventure novels require dramatic simplicities, not historical subtleties. Just like justifying the book. This person, whoever is writing it, is pretty classist, in my opinion. Historical truth is always secondary to fictional invention. Yet, for modern readers, some historical periods are certainly more neutral than others. The French Revolution, because of its influence on modern institutions, to say nothing of its distinctive role in the French and European imagination, is certainly not an anodyne event in history. The legacy of the French Revolution in the French collective memory, and from the Giver that we were just talking about, at once immense and paradoxical, resurfaced during the debates that surrounded the celebration of the Revolution's bicentennial in 1989. Impassioned discussions of the Revolution's causes and significance, together with a plethora of theories by French historians, bear witness to the complex issues at stake. The bicentennial, in fact, sparked debates. Oh yeah, I guess that sentence sounds very similar. The bicentennial, in fact, sparked debates in France that attempted to redefine the legacy of the Revolution, to demystify it and analyze it through the prism of objective historical analysis. Should the Revolution be embraced in the name of its immense significance? Should some of its darkest and bloodiest episodes be reread and interpreted differently? I would say so, talking about how working class people get fed up with their poor conditions and eventually rise up against their oppressors. Or is it a founding myth completely sacred and untouchable, regardless of the violence involved? For some, the terror that Baroness Orczy so vividly portrays in her novels is an unfortunate and non-essential episode in an otherwise seminal political and historical event. For others, the terror belongs to the very essence of the Revolution, is the Revolution, and thus cannot be marginalized. But you can marginalize the class consciousness in talking about the reasons for having the Revolution in the first place. This may explain why, for some readers, the Scarlet Pimpernel's approach to the Revolution and the terror is anathema, precisely because it confronts these delicate debates with the splendid insouciance and black and white universe of the adventure novel. Here, there is not much room for nuance or ambiguity. Yeah, and that's a problem. The efficacy of this type of text relies on an obvious conflict and a chivalric, courageous, and clear-headed hero. Whoops. Of course, Baroness Orczy's novels are not the only fictional narratives that take the French Revolution as their setting. Because of its highly theatrical nature and its impact on Europe during the following 2 centuries, the Revolution has become almost ubiquitous in fiction. Many popular and adventure novels have used the French Revolution as a theme, or at least as a décor. The 19th century, for instance, the century of the popular novel, par excellence, saw the birth of a number of novels in France and England offering a variety of political perspectives on the Revolution. Similarly, at different moments throughout history, the French Revolution has been used as a metaphor for popular power, as a sublime entity, or, yet again, as a testimonial to the excesses of the mob, or as an example of what mobs can do when they are angry enough at the ruling class. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there. we still have a bit of the introduction. So I think tomorrow I'm going to start a little bit earlier with the reading. And so that we can get into the actual body of the literature. Anyway. Tomorrow we'll finish this talk about Orientalism, tie it into current events. I want to talk more about the French Revolution and class consciousness, how that applies to current events, and then get more into this. Okay, that's going to be it for me today. But thank you for being here. It was good chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.